A small group of law enforcement officers in our area have been through some very rigorous training. They're called drug recognition experts.
The Sioux Falls Police Department has several DREs, as they're called for short. KSFY News reporter Erica Lee found out exactly what they do and how much training is required. It's a story you'll only see here on KSFY.
If you think you're okay to drive,
out in front of a car, he was clear over in the other lane, comes back over.
drug recognition experts are out and about across the state, but especially in Sioux Falls, looking for people under the influence behind the wheel.
I would say one of the other top ones that we see that people are impaired by and driving under the influence of is marijuana.
With marijuana legalized nearby in Colorado, it's becoming much more common and much more potent than ever before.
I had one where she had gotten some edibles out in Colorado. It was a chocolate bar, and ate that chocolate bar on the way back on the plane. Got back to town here in Sioux Falls, and she was stopped on the interstate for really bad driving, and she was really impaired.
Officer Jason Christensen is just one of 5 Sioux Falls officers trained to notice things like this car in front of us that took a right-hand turn from the left-hand lane.
All right, why don't you come back to my car with me here?
And in this case, his extensive training paid off.
How many hours ago has it been since you smoked the marijuana?
He pulled over a 19-year-old woman with her 4-year-old daughter in the car, and once he approached, could immediately smell and see he had found someone operating under the influence.
You're going to forward count 69 to 83, and then 83 back to 69.
70, 71, 72, 73, 74, 75, shaking now, 76, 77, 78, 79, 80, 81, 82, 83, and then back would be, I'm nervous now, I'm shaking. 281, 79, 78, 76, 75, 74, 73, 72, 71, 70, 69.
The driver failed multiple tests.
Okay, you're under arrest for driving under the influence of the marijuana.
But that wasn't all.
We got there.
I'm guessing probably an ounce.
It's all part of their goal to keep drugged drivers off the road.
Some cognac she has. Where was that?
That was underneath the driver's seat.
Alcohol is just one impairment, and if the breathalyzer comes up negative,
then you'll need an officer that has training in recognizing those other signs and symptoms of drugs other than alcohol.
Leading the charge for the Sioux Falls Police, Officer Chris Treadway. He was trained as a DRE during his time in Nebraska.
It's nice to have that extra experience. I've been a drug recognition expert since 2003, and I've been an instructor since 2009.
For him,
training these guys is fun.
And the process to even get to the training is extensive.
They have to be very proficient in DUI enforcement, and they have to have a recommendation letter from the state's attorney's office. They also have to be recommended by their supervisor. It's a very time-consuming process, which involves a lot of federal grant money.
For officers trained in DRE, the requirements to stay current are even more strict in South Dakota than the rest of the country.
They have to perform at least 4 evaluations every 2 years, and they have to have 8 hours of update training every 2 years. Here in South Dakota, we do training every year, and we have to do 6 evaluations every 2 years.
Officer Treadway's extensive training also helps other officers in the field.
They're calling you all the time with questions, and I love that. I love the fact that they're asking questions. You know, they think I've probably seen it or been through it, but to tell you the truth, even with all my experience, I learn something all the time.
While all DREs have seen their fair share of drug drivers, this sign holds special significance for Officer Christensen. He regularly drives by it to remind himself of why he wanted to be a DRE in the first place.
Here's an example of what we're out there to prevent. He was out for a motorcycle ride, minding his own business, coming down 41st Street here. Wasn't doing anything wrong. And he encountered an individual that was pulling out of this driveway here and was impaired by methamphetamine and marijuana. That motorcyclist, who was doing absolutely nothing wrong, ran into his vehicle and suffered fatal injuries. Every time I drive by here, you know, this is just an example and a reminder of why I do what I do.
When you have this extra facet to your department and you have these drug recognition experts, you were able to take a lot more impaired drivers off the street.
In Sioux Falls, Erica Lee, KSFY News.
Officer Treadway says the Sioux Falls Police Department tries to identify candidates and get 2 officers trained in the DRE program every year, but they rely on federal grant money for it, so sometimes they can only get 1 officer trained every year.